Welcome to the Beyond the Numbers podcast. Thank you, first of all, to our sponsor, Nubria, and today's guest, Aaron Burns. Would you mind introducing yourself for anybody that doesn't know?
Hi, my name's Aaron Burns. I'm former professional footballer, business owner, insurance expert, book connoisseur, and somebody who is trying to make reading cool.
So let's go right back to teenage years, which I've not done before, but I think it's relevant to your story because throughout your teenage years, I imagine, we've just had a chat in the back, so I found out a little bit about it, and you was good in school and well educated, but I imagine a lot of it was tunnel vision on football. So how did that look like growing up in Wythenshawe?
Really grateful for the opportunities that presented themselves. I think the story starts a little bit before Wythenshawe. I grew up to a single parent. My mum was 16 when she had me, and we lived in Moss Side. And due to sort of like her picking a partner that wasn't very good for her, we ended up moving to Wythenshawe when I was about 7 to live with my grandma. I moved and started a school, primary school called Button Lane, which is actually the same one that Marcus Rashford ended up going to, and that was really where I found football. I went into the playground and I had no idea about football or anything along those lines, and I just made a friend, and he asked me who I supported, and I didn't really know. He told me Man United were the best at the time, and I've got a little bit of an addictive personality, so I went away and started researching the club and obviously playing at break time and at lunchtime, and quickly found out that I was a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, and a little bit better than these kids that had maybe played for 3 or 4 years and spent a lot of time with their dads practicing and stuff. So I got offered an opportunity to go and play for a local team called Wythenshawe Amateurs, but where I came from, we didn't have a lot of money, so I was worried walking home that day with my mum to ask her if she could afford for me to go and pay my subs and get me a pair of football boots. And thankfully, we ordered some Puma Kings from the catalogue, and off I went. And I went there as a blank canvas, knew very little about it, so I used the coaches as experts and took their guidance, and used the logic that I'd learned in the 7 or 8 years to try and just be the best version of myself. I managed to score, I think it was 107 goals in that season, and within less than a full season, I was off to Man United on trial, which then propels into the next 10 or 20 years of my life. So I was really fortunate. It came from a circumstance where my mum got herself in a bad situation. We moved to an area which was obviously Wythenshawe, which brought a lot of difficulties for me just because of the colour of my skin and things of that nature, but it also brought a lot of opportunities, and we managed to maximise those, unearth a talent, and that's led me to sitting here talking on a podcast today.
How did you find moving schools at 7? What do you remember about that? Do you feel like, you've already kind of touched on it, but football kind of helped you to fit in pretty quickly?
Yeah, I was born in 1987, so in the early 90s in Moss Side, everyone looked and sounded like me. So moving to Wythenshawe, which was a little bit more of a white area, was difficult because you get questions not from a place of sort of like hate, but just from a lack of knowledge. And obviously TV weren't big. We probably had about 4 channels back in the day. So they used to ask certain questions which made me feel a little bit uncomfortable, but also made me understand that I had 2 ways of dealing with it. I either became sort of like hurt by it and got angry, or I became an educator. So I went away at 7 or 8 and started to try and understand as much as I possibly could about my culture. And now the way you do that is through music or through powerful leaders. So I started studying Muhammad Ali, Tupac Shakur, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, and understanding what it really meant to be black, so that I could pass on information and knowledge to people, so that they wouldn't go away and say things that were incorrect to their peers. So yeah, there was a lot of struggle and strife, but on the other side of that, as always, is opportunity, and we just tried to maximise it. And through football, we made friends.
Just for the record, so for anybody that cares, I moved school at 8 as well, and I can remember scoring a hat-trick at my new school on the first day. didn't lead to Man United, but yeah, I had a good first day anyway, and I
Playing
settled in.
Patrick
Yeah,
Gibson.
yeah. So you're at United, obviously going to school alongside that. How did that look for those years for the
Superb.
teams?
Man United is everything is about ethics and standards and the way that you hold yourself as a Manchester United player, and that was infused into me as soon as you walk into the cliff at the time, and you're seeing pictures of David Beckham and Andy Cole and Eric Cantona and Ryan Giggs and all these guys that you idolise, but you understand they come from situations similar to yourself, and because of hard work and dedication, they've managed to be world class in their individual field, which is fantastic. But I think the underlying message that it gave to me is that I kind of was never off the clock, because if I had half an hour in class that weren't great, I knew that was getting reported back to Man United, or I was the kid that was at Man United. And through your peer group as well, you hold a lot of pressure from family members or from your friends to be the one that goes and makes it. So a lot of the time you're making decisions based on not what's fun right now, but how's that what's that gonna lead to? How are people gonna perceive it? And is that gonna be detrimental to your future? So at 9 or 10, you're starting to make educated decisions, which is what I try and implement into my kids.
So just to get a picture of where you was at when you was at United, 9, 10, 11, 12, was you already thinking I'm special? Like as a footballer, I mean, was you like head and shoulders above even people? Not head and shoulders above United, but like you felt like already I'm someone that has a great chance of turning pro at that young age.
Do you know what? It's going to sound mad, but I had that feeling from about 4 or 5 before I even knew what football was or where my talent was going to be. I felt that I was going to make an impact and that was going to be important. And the social proof was that I was starting to get recognised and be good at football. So I always wanted to hold myself in high esteem. And there's a lot of people at the moment. Kanye West gets a lot of flack, but what I do like about him is that he's got that self-confidence and that aura to know that he's going to have an impact. But going back to your question, from probably 4 or 5, as early as I can remember, I felt as though I was going to be important. So when I was researching the likes of Tupac and Malcolm X and people like that, I was resonating with them a little bit. So I think there's definitely a social pressure to perform, to be on the clock. But it was something that I wanted and that I tried to achieve as quickly as possible.
And how do you think that you managed to actually still prioritise school? Because I know that you did well and you managed to do well in your football and school at the same time. That's not common, is it? Like managing to actually still perform like and have an education at the same time. I don't mean that it's football's obviously. I'm not saying footballers aren't educated. I'm saying it's hard to be tunnel vision on your football while also still performing in school. How did you manage that? Why do you think you managed to do well there as well?
Because football was or is it's just a career. There's always going to be a human element, and I talk about I've got a mission statement to impact 100,000 lives, and when I was 9, 10 or 11, for me that was probably scoring a winner in an FA Cup final against City like Kobbie Mainoo did last season. But ultimately that doesn't last very long. It feels great for a day or for a couple of weeks, but next season when you come back to the pitch and the performances are not going well and you're injured, everyone's forgot about that. So impact for me ultimately was how you make people feel, a lasting impression, and I knew that was going to be bigger than football. And I think the pitfalls that people fall into is that they see themselves as a footballer, whereas I always wanted to be a visionary or a leader. And if football was going to be my vehicle to doing that, then brilliant. We'll maximise that, and I'll give everything I've got. But I always thought my value was bigger than that.
So if we skip forward to you being around about the 16, 17 mark, when people start to really think about signing a professional contract and looking towards the first team, what do things look like for you at that time?
Scary, because you've had 5 or 6 years where everything's leading up to this moment. Have your grades stayed at a certain level? Have your performances been good? And have you maximised your potential whilst dealing with the pressure of playing for Man United? And ultimately, are you good enough? And it feels as though your whole life is depending on this yes or no from these coaches. So it's scary looking back in it now. there was still going to be a lot of opportunities if that was a no, and potentially your career may go a different avenue, and you might have a better career if it was a no. Fortunately for me, the answer that I wanted was yes, and we left school, and within about 3 or 4 weeks we was full-time footballers and trying to chase the dream, which was superb.
So just to give people a picture, you're around the under 18s, reserves, that kind of thing. Who would have been around you at that time?
The first team was stacked.
Yeah.
So Cristiano, Ronaldo, Nani, Henrik Larsson, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Louis Saha, Gary Neville, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Michael Carrick, Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, Edwin van der Sar. That was
So it's peak 2008,
this is
2007, Man
2008,
United,
2008, Man United,
Um,
2007.
And who would have been in your peer group coming into the first team with you?
We had a great youth team. So Gerard Piqué, Giuseppe Rossi, Fraser Campbell, Danny Simpson, Ryan Shawcross, Johnny Evans, Darren Gibson, Tom Eaton. Just naming a few names that
It's
obviously
crazy
went on to
because
have good careers. In my
they're
youth
pretty much
team.
household names, and that's people coming through, not the people in the first team coming into the first team. So how did you find then starting to kind of go up a level and be mixing with the first team? How did that feel?
The first team were doing superb, so you knew that you had to be special, and the opportunities were a rarity if you got the call to go over and train. And with the first team, it was a big thing. So that was great. But towards sort of like 17 or 18, you kind of knew that the pathway was going to be very, very difficult. So you start thinking about what did your career look like away from the club, and ultimately it's probably counterproductive in the moment because you should be chasing the highest mountaintop, but ultimately you have to be a realist as well at some point. And they were flying. I was obviously a forward player, so the people in, I forgot to mention Wayne Rooney, by the way. The people the people in those positions were superb. You look at the people in and around me that were my age: Fraser Campbell, Giuseppe Rossi, Sylvain Ebanks, Blake. People of that nature were my age or above me, waiting to get into the first team as well. So opportunities were scarce, but when they came, you had to try and take them.
So if we skip forward a little bit, what did your remaining days at United look like, and when did you start to navigate next steps from there?
I think you get into a situation where I was top scorer in the reserves in my last season, so I was still doing okay. I was doing well, but you go into that meeting knowing that it might be a no this time. Whereas at 16 you were a little bit more confident. So I'm going into the meeting room at 20 or whatever I was, and he just said the manager just said that I'd done really, really well, but there was no through road, and that was potentially going to stunt my growth. So he said, go and make yourself a career in the game. If I'm being honest, sort of like a part of you dies at that moment, because everything that you've prepared for, because you're very insular, means that you want to get into Man United's first team, and you've not seen things outside of that really. So going on the trials at other well-respected clubs, but they don't have the facilities or the infrastructure that Manchester United have, was a massive eye-opener. You're obviously going out and playing every single game for points, and people need the money to pay the mortgages, etc. But yeah, I just didn't enjoy it quite as much after that period.
And where was you up to with your own education then? Like, at what point? Because obviously tunnel vision on being a footballer and tunnel vision on Man United in particular. At what point did you start to kind of start working on Plan B? Obviously, for anyone that doesn't know, your football career does carry on way beyond this, but at some point you do start to work on other things as well. When did that start to click?
Looking back in reflection, I'd focused a lot on education up until 16, but then when you get the yes, you sort of like start to focus on football, and for 3 or 4 years I became very tunnel vision, and I think that was probably my biggest mistake, that I believed or perceived that education would stop at 16 and that would be that. I probably didn't pick up a book again till I was about 28, 29. Now, what I understand in hindsight, and hindsight's a great thing, is that if I'd have carried on reading, I would have been able to overcome certain hurdles and obstacles a lot better. I would have been studying successful people from outside of the industry, whether it be other sports or successful business people. And I would have had then at that point coping mechanisms or strategies or structures in place to be successful or maximise my potential, which might have just given me the extra 1 or 2% to go on and have a better career. So that's, I think, why reading's so important to me now, because at 16, education almost stopped, even though I'd done really well. And I focused singularly on football definitely for the next 4 years. And then there was obviously a transitional period, but had I been reading, had I continued to educate myself, had I taken that seriously, I would have definitely been a better individual. And I probably would have had a little bit more success on the pitch.
And at what point did you stop being a full-time footballer? How old would you have been around then?
Full time, probably 24, 25.
Yeah. And is that when what was the first kind of, I don't know if you went straight into a job or your own business, but what was the first thing you did outside of football that sense?
I got a job in a call centre through my cousin.
What call centre would that have been?
It's called Universal Utilities. It was telecoms. So my cousin worked there, and he got me a job. I'd been thinking for probably a year that I wasn't making enough money to retire at 35. And as I said to you before, I didn't want to be the guy at 35 that was sat in an interview that had not done anything for 20 years, or in their opinion, not done anything. So I wanted to get educated. I wanted to have some business experience, and I understood that I had a platform or a strategy to be successful to a really high level within 10 or 15 years. And I knew that if I could give myself 10 or 15 years and apply myself in the same way that I did for football, become a student of something, that would ultimately be successful in 15 years' time in the business industry. So what that was going back to stage one, which was humility, humble beginnings. And I took a job in a call centre, and that for me was the equivalent of walking into Wythenshawe Amateurs at 9, not knowing anything what I'm doing. So the fact that you'd been at Man United and you'd been a professional footballer, that doesn't matter to Karen or to Frank in the call centre. They might ask you a question about football, but you're the new guy. So be humble, learn as much as you possibly can, but understand that your trajectory and your strategies will allow you to be successful if you implement a consistent blueprint throughout.
And if you're being honest, when you started at the call centre, was that a negative thing, or did you go in with the mindset of, this is the beginning of a new journey, I'm up for this is a stepping stone?
I think you always start with that mindset. But it got tough because the hours were long, considering what people work now.
Just for the record, I've done call centres as well. I totally relate to what you're saying. Yeah,
they had a big board, and it was flashing red and that, because calls were waiting and people were like pointing at you and stuff. And you always think you know how to talk on the phone, don't you, when you're a kid, because you speak to your mates or whatever. But answering the phone to a customer that's not very happy is a difficult ball game. So I had a lot of learning to do. There was a lot of days where I thought I might just jack this in, but I had a young one, and I knew where I wanted to be, and I knew that really quitting wasn't in my DNA. So I persevered, but there was a couple of dark days where I didn't want to go to work. Yeah, 100%.
It's hard work. There's a lot of sets and reps in call centres. You get a lot of experience very quick.
Yeah.
And where did you go from there then? Like, when did when did you start getting into the world of insurance? Like, did that come through work, or?
Kind of did. So I was in the call centre, and I got promoted within 6 months to be a technical support supervisor. So I was leading a team of 20 people, and I knew how to be in a team. I had a lot of transitional skills. So I did that for 2 or 3 years, and then I moved into a changed role and moved job to a high spend account manager for a company called Chess Telecom in Audley Edge. And during that process, I'd done an apprenticeship, team leading level 3 MVQ. And I really liked what they were doing, because they were trying to teach me to be better, which football was ultimately only an apprenticeship. So then I had an idea that I wanted to go into apprenticeships in the education system in order to give people the opportunity that I'd had through football to be successful in businesses, because maybe going to university wasn't, from what I could see, wasn't helping people enough. Like, they were going, spending 3 or 4 years there, and they were coming out of of those university qualifications and not getting jobs. And the fear that I had previously that someone would gain an advantage on me from working. Now I thought they were losing experience time in university, so I wanted to impact through apprenticeship. So I got a job with Learn Direct, which changed into People Plus as a business development manager, which was my first sort of like selling capacity, but I was focusing on IT apprenticeships because of the way the world was going and the telecoms experience that I had. But when I went in, I had a heavy focus on diversity and equality. I wanted to create equal opportunities for people in the IT space because there was a gender deficiency in the space and a cultural deficiency as well. So when I was speaking to employers, I was going there to sell them the benefits of apprenticeship, but with a different level of thought process, really.
So you started to move into sales quite a bit here, and even I'm assuming the call center was customer service when you're saying that people are calling in angry. That's sales as well, obviously bringing people around. Do you think you always had a bit of a knack for sales, or is this something that you started to learn on the job?
I definitely didn't grow up thinking I was going to be a salesperson, but I knew how to speak to people. I knew how to communicate. I knew how to negotiate from quite early. Whether that be getting away with my mum or with women as I got
sales,
a little bit older. Yeah,
I've had this chat with other people before, and a lot of people, they don't recognise what sales actually is. So when people say I'm not a salesperson, they're thinking of car salesmen, pushy people, all this kind of stuff. Sales, as you're touching on, is persuasion, people skills, influence, how knowing how to get what you want.
Yeah, presentation as well. Like if you were trying to date a girl, you present yourself in the right way. You'd socially impact her through a friends or a network, and you'd be in the same areas that she would be. And I think if you would take that mindset and relate it to a business opportunity, I understood, I saw through it. So I didn't start out wanting to be a salesperson, but I could communicate, I could talk. I had something that people wanted to talk to me about, and I presented myself well. So yeah, I took all those transitional skills outside of football, plus obviously the interview techniques and the working in a team and understanding people from different countries and different languages, etc. And I just tried to formulate all those skills that I'd learned in football and that I thought was only football based, and put them in the world, and try and impact as much as I possibly can whilst forging a career and ultimately trying to be an expert, because in my opinion there wasn't many people coming out of football and with the same aspirations, goals and visions that I had. So if I was going to be first on the island, I could set the tone through consistency and transitional skills as to what I was going to be an expert in, because I'd been an expert there. I'd been at Man United. I got into, I got a squad number and signed a professional deal. So I'd been an expert, but I knew what it took to get back to the top of the mountain. I was willing to do it.
Quick one. So I'm aware quite a few of you watching the podcast don't have a clue what I do. I run Sales Hero, and Sales Hero is a business that helps small businesses get more from the sales processes. We help you to make more money, buy much more of your time back, and just simply fall in love with your businesses again. We have free services. We do consulting, where we'll simply help you to build a new process. We do Done With You, which will allow us to scrap what you're currently doing, build a whole new sales process, and help you to run that going forward, or simply Done For You, which is where we will come in, scrap your process, build a new one, and then run it for you. All three of them allow you to make more money, get more time back, and fall in love with your business again, and allow you to get back to doing what you're the best at, which is probably the thing that you started the business for in the first place. Now back to the episode. In your career, you don't need to mention the job, the club if you don't want to, but would you have said that things started to shift to your career being the priority over the football?
When you get into sort of like non-league, semi-pro, you come across some chairmans who have obviously done really, really well in whatever they do, and they've taken on a football club, but wages need to get paid on certain days and certain times, and there were certain situations where that wasn't happening. I was fortunate that I wasn't necessarily depending on the money week in, week out, but it was a lot of people that were, because of being in full-time football within the football pyramid, non-league, sort of like conference level. So it was probably at that moment that I realised that I like to control as much as I can, control the controllables, and this was out of my control. If the chairman didn't pay us on the day he said he was going to pay, we were all turning up to training just waiting and hoping, and I didn't want to be in that position.
And At which point was it that you started to then go on your own? You've obviously clearly picking up a lot of skills in the corporate world and sales skills and dealing with people. At what point did you think, do you know what, I'm gonna actually start to build my own business here?
So I'd obviously I was starting to build a little bit of reputation within sort of like apprenticeships, and I was showing up on a consistent basis and stuff like that. And then a good friend of mine, who's a public speaker, he went and did a talk in the northeast for an insurance business. He blew them away. They were blown away by him, and an opportunity presented itself to sort of like get into the insurance space, which he rang me on the way back, and he said, "This is what has been offered. I haven't got the full capacity to do it, but I think me and you could do it really well." And him and his wife are really successful individuals. So I received that call, and I think, well, if they're saying it's good, let's sit down. So we sat down and we looked over the numbers and we looked over our network and things like that, and we just gave it a go. I just backed myself, and I always tell people to be ready for the opportunity of a lifetime in a lifetime of the opportunity, and that was it. The football stuff, because I knew him through football. He'd been at Man United, year below me when we was kids, so I'd known him for 15, 20 years before this point. He'd obviously seen what I was doing. We were friends, and he believed in me and said there's an opportunity, and I just picked it up and ran with it.
And when would this have been, roughly?
Before COVID, so
Yeah.
2018-ish maybe.
And this is the business that you're working on now currently?
The sector that I'm working in now.
Yeah, right. And then is this the actual business that you're working on now, or has that evolved into something else now?
It's evolving, it's constantly evolving. But it started out just building a sort of like a life insurance franchise in Manchester with myself and Joe Thompson, and we picked it up and we used influence in our network, and we started protecting families in terms of putting life insurance, critical illness, income protection in place, utilising people in sport that we knew that were maturing, because we're all sort of like 27, 28, 30, having kids, getting mortgages, and we didn't know what was right and what was wrong. And the situation that I found myself in prior to understanding about insurance was that I had a mortgage and I'd got a life insurance policy, but when I'd sat there, I was almost made to feel as though this was the option. If you don't take the insurance policy out, you're not going to get the mortgage. And they were only talking about one particular lender. So I left that meeting feeling happy that I'd got the mortgage and I'd got some insurance, but feeling unhappy that I wasn't educated or I didn't have the right information, advice and guidance. And that left a little bit of a sour taste in my mouth, because I kind of want to be an expert in things. So I took it, I had it, but I knew that was the experience that I'd felt. So if that was me, how did everyone else feel? And I thought it was our objective to get out and speak to as many people as possible, review the policies, look at what they've got, and make sure that they understood why it was important and why they had the amounts of cover that they had, or if they needed more, because I left that meeting unsure as to what I had and why I really needed it.
What would you say to somebody like me that's not got life insurance at the minute, who's got a business, who's got responsibilities and a house and lots of things I need to be protecting? What would you say to me? Because we could do this deal afterwards.
We
so,
will.
You can start the pitch now.
The tough line is, do you love your family? We work so hard every single day. You're working really hard. You've got a lovely home. You've got a lovely family, and we work to protect it day in, day out. And what you have to think about is the worst case scenario. Cancer's 1 in 2. You could get hit by a bus. You could be off work or unable to start earning, and before you know it, things start crumbling, and it filters down to your partner and your kids, and they're affected, because finances are so important, and it's tough out there in terms of people are struggling financially. And the worst case scenario is you get a really bad diagnosis, but the first thing you'll think about after that is, am I going to survive or live? Is, I'm going to pay mortgage, I'm going to pay for the car, how am I going to do all those things if my health's not in check? And you can't put a price on health.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where everyone's sold on it, and I certainly am. It's just, I said to you before, it always seems to be a tomorrow job, doesn't it? And I guess that's probably the main battle that you have, people just getting it done.
Yeah, it's on everyone's to-do list, but where it ranks is quite low down. And actually, self-preservation says that we all think we're going to live forever, so we don't want to actually talk about the what ifs. You know, I've had people speak to me in years gone by and say, I think it's really important, but I don't want to jinx it. I don't want to talk about it in case it happens. And I'm thinking, it's all well and good, but it's probably it's an hour conversation, and then it's sorted. So I would encourage people to review it and have a look into it. It's probably not going to be as expensive as they think they are, and it's never going to be cheaper than today, because the way the insurance world works is it's all numbers and data. So tomorrow you're going to be a day older, a day closer to your death, and therefore technically your policy is going to be a little bit more expensive. And whilst you're fit and healthy, it's definitely a proactive rather than a reactive thing, because if you do get ill, get cancer, etc., probably not going to be able to get a policy for the next 4 or 5 years, because the provider won't want to take a gamble on your health. So it's better to do it while you're fit and healthy.
And obviously, I've made it a bit light-hearted, making it about me. But anybody that wants to, who doesn't have life insurance, Aaron's links are going to be at the bottom of this podcast. So to move on from that, you've obviously spoke a lot about skill acquisition without using the word. About even when you're in football, you've looked at wanting to become an expert at things, etc., etc. What do you think are your top 3 skills right now? Why? What makes you an effective business person and networker?
I think communication is super important. It's the power to the universe. If we're all better communicators, there would be probably less wars and less controversy going on. It's a great question. That I think one of my best skills is that I'm willing to acquire new knowledge. That I'm humble enough to understand that I don't know a lot of things about most things. So I'm eager to seek out knowledge and information. I think that's important. And I think perspective is huge. There's always 2 sides to the coin. So there's how I see it, there's how you see it, and then there's probably what's right or wrong. And I think having a perspective to understand that I have to be able to see your opinion in every situation, even if it's contrary to mine, is probably a superpower.
So if we move on to books, obviously in your intro you said you want to make books cool. A lot of people will know that you have Aaron's Book Club, networking, business, books. How did that come about, and why did you create this networking group?
Long-winded, but I'll try and shorten it as much as possible. So when we were starting the business, I'm massive on vision boards and goal setting. So I had a plan that I wanted to have like a 4 or 5 stage process. And initially, I wanted to start a movement to create equal opportunities for people. So I don't think that anyone should get any special dispensation, but I understand that I got into certain interviews in certain rooms because of the Man United thing. Whereas if they were just going off my postcode or my CV, I'm not getting the interview. And I think there's a lot of people that come from where I come from that look like I look, that have got a lot of skills and talent to be given, and the opportunities are not potentially there. So I started this thing called ABC, which was initially was going to be about BAME careers, which I then made into sort of like a 5-stage plan. So I started doing a lot of running, and I started just posting Aaron Burns calories, because my name's obviously Aaron Burns. It goes with the ABC, because I needed people to understand that eventually we was going to start talking about this diversity thing, and if they knew the name and the title, it would ultimately resonate, because at that moment in time, no one knew how passionate I was about diversity and equality. But going a step further than that, stage 3 was always going to be Aaron's Book Club, because I was reading a lot, and a lot of the implementation and the strategies that I was implementing in my own life that I was having a success with came from books. So that was always in the back of my mind, and I kept sharing the books that I was reading, and eventually 10, 15, 20 people a month would come and ask me for book recommendations. I was just WhatsApping people books all the time, screenshotting them from my audio books. So it got to January last year, and I just said, you know what, I'm just gonna do it. I'm gonna start a book club and see how many people turn up. And the first one last January was 90 people came. So yeah, we read Manifest by Roxy Nafousi, and off we went. We've now got 400 people in the book club. And that's leading into now the ABC Academy, which is me trying to teach people between 11 to 18 skills to be successful in a life, because the education system maybe needs a little bit of tweaking. It's not probably up to date with where we are in the world, the technology element, etc. And I don't think we study leaders or successful people enough, especially in this new era. So if we can do that via books and making reading cool, I think we'll give our younger generation a platform to be successful in a difficult world where there's a lot of distractions, there's a lot of mental health issues, and sometimes you can walk through those problems via logic, strategy, and a skill set. So, yeah, it came about because people were asking me for recommendations, decided to start a WhatsApp group. It kind of blew up, and off we go. In regards to the book club now, we are having a little bit of a pivot with it, and I'm trying to teach people how to build successful businesses via business-based or self-development books, which will enable them to be successful. So teaching them skills, techniques, sales techniques, things that I've learned in books that are going to be pillars for success within their business. So that's what we're doing with the adult section, and then the ABC Academy is going to be me going into schools or environments where young people are, and telling them about the lessons that I've read in a textbook, and trying to allow them to understand that might take them to the next level.
So if you were to recommend 3 books to business owners, I'm sure you've probably got about 10 you'd want to recommend, but what would be your top 3 books that you'd recommend, and why?
Tipping Point was superb, Malcolm Gladwell. It talks about sort of like how many people you can actually manage, and he thinks that the tipping point is 150, because then you have to work out what 150 one-on-one relationships are happening. So I need to know your relationship with the person that you sit next to and the person that you sit behind.
I think I've heard of this principle. I don't know if it's from the book, but because I've been involved in gyms before, like these micro gyms, people have referenced this. I don't know if it's the book or a study where if you have any more than 150 members, there's going to be a tipping point, as you just touched on. Is that from the study, or is this?
It'll be from the book probably. But I don't know what that multiplies to, but it's about 3,500 individual one-on-one relationships that you have to be on top of as a leader. So that's a great book. I think that's something that you should read. How to Win Friends and Influence People, for me, is the best book in the world. Definitely should be on everyone's list. And then, because you've made me choose 3, I'm going to give you 2 options for the last one, is either Atomic Habits or The Compound Effect.
Yeah, 2 well-known business books. Why do you think, to go to the second recommendation, why do you think that's the best book ever? Do you think it's because it's transferable to many different fields? Because it's obviously not a business book, is it? It's more about, because it's an old book, it's more about, I would say, just how to kind of navigate life and succeed. But what would you take from that?
I like this. You're a reader, right? I can tell.
Not as much as you, but I've read some books, yeah.
So what I really like about it is the principles of networking. The fact that I can make you feel special by understanding or listening to you in such a way to tell you that your son's 3 and that you really care about him because you said that before. So if I make a note of that, child's birthday, your birthday, things that are really important to you, if I meet you for a second time and that's the first thing that I bring up, you feel empowered. You feel as though I've paid real attention to it. And actually, I have paid attention to it, but I've just been clerical in the fact that I've jotted it down and I've had it in a space and I've understood, or I've been thoughtful enough to know that I'm going to see Josh again next week. Let me just remember his kids' names or go on his social media profile and see what he's been up to. So I'm just paying attention and paying an interest to you. And people value that more than a lot of things that you could give them that are material. So for me, that's why it's the best book, because it's about being thoughtful and strategizing in how you make people feel, because ultimately that's all you leave them with.
And obviously you mentioned the academy, the ABC Academy. What kind of advice are you going in and giving to that age group? Because these are an age group that are in education, whether they're in school still or they're in college. What kind of advice are you giving them? Are you giving them life advice? Are you trying to give them ideas for paths they can go down? Are you trying to instill them with skills that can kind of help them any direction they go? What are you trying to do when you do the academy?
So the education system sets it out that you make a sort of life decision at 16. as to where you think your future's going to go. But you haven't had that many life experiences, really. Your exposures to the working world is Instagram, maybe, or your mum or your dad. So ultimately, you make something, a life decision based on something that you feel you're interested in potentially in the last 6 to 12 months, which you get down the college and the university route and realise that that's not for you. So for me now, reading will enable them to understand different aspects, different elements of businesses and success strategies. But first and foremost, what I go in and teach is the 7 steps of how to make a really successful vision board and what vision looks like, because a lot of the time it's just material objects, but we don't take into consideration how we want to feel when we acquire them, whether they're sort of like regulated or aligned with a potential success or delayed gratification, all of those things. And I think we're missing a massive thing in school. And the reason why I was successful is because every season at Man United, the coach sets out an agenda of what we're trying to achieve this season. And within that, I've got to set out an individual agenda. How many goals do I want to score? How many assists am I going to get? How many games do I want to play? How many minutes I'm going to play in those games? So I've broken it down to within the microcosm of the finite details. Whereas sometimes in education, we're just free spirits and then asked to make a really important decision. And then we're free spirits for 5 or 6 years ago. And then we come into the working world and we don't even use the degree we've had because we chose it when we were 16.
It's true. I can remember being in year 11 and everyone was talking about going to college open days, and I didn't even know. I didn't even thought about it. A lot of people who maybe had parents that were driving college or uni or whatnot might have actually had understanding. I didn't even know. I missed all the open days and I went straight into work at 16. And I think at the end of the day, no one's ready really to be making those decisions at 16.
Correct.
So if we now move on to the 2 final questions I always do, the reason I'm bringing them up a little bit earlier than usual is because I think they're really relevant for you. So we might take a little bit more time on them than usual. So the first question is, what advice would you give to an 18-year-old Aaron Burns looking back now? Because you was in a real moment in time then when maybe you wouldn't have pictured where you'd be right now. It might have been a completely different vision. So what advice would you give to him, and kind of if you look back at that person then?
I would say to him, start reading, start educating yourself on what's going to happen, because even if you have the most successful career, you're only going to pay till 35, which is 16 years away. So it's not going to be forever. Appreciate the moments, because eventually they're just going to be memories, and you can't get them back. And understand that you have the power to make people feel special in the most small moments, which ultimately may change someone's day, week, or life, ultimately. And I think there's been times where I haven't been as present as I possibly could be, and therefore I haven't impacted as much as I would have wanted to in reflection. So I'd probably say that.
So you really, if you could go back, you'd maybe enjoy the moments a little bit more, but also maybe not put all your eggs so much in one basket, would you say?
Yeah. Like I say, from 16 to 20, I was super focused on being a footballer, and that was what we were told you needed to do. The game's changed a little bit now, but I definitely would have been educating myself to be more than a footballer, because I'm seeing people coming out of the game that have had the epitome of a successful career, won Premier Leagues, played in Champions League, played 400 games in the Premier League, and as soon as football forgets about you, and it does very, very quickly, you kind of lose your identity, because you've seen yourself for 25 years as a footballer, and you're so much more than that. And that's where mental health kicks in, coping mechanisms, strategies need to be in place. And if you're only successful when you're being told what to do, under tutorship and led, then you might struggle. So yeah, I think it's really important that you see yourself as more than that, and continue to educate yourself as much as you possibly can be, to make sure that when you come back to civilization, because ultimately that's what you're going to have to do, that you're ready for the world and you understand certain situations and things. Because I'll give you an example. When COVID struck, I had a friend of mine who was still playing at the time, but as footballers at that level, sometimes you've got a chef or whatever, or you're ordering the food and or whatever. The world stopped. There's a crisis here now. Like, football's not happening. The stadiums are empty. You're not going into a training ground. You've got to go and do your work on your own. And some of them didn't even know how to do the shopping. They just had it done for them for the last 15 or 20 years, and that was the real moment for me. It was before the careers were due to end, but I'm thinking we're a little bit off it here, like in terms of where we actually need to be as humans. You're doing really well. You're doing so well at this, but you're so far down on these things, and the competitor in me and in us would suggest that we'd need to be 70 or 80 or 90% at everything, in the top 10% at everything. And we're in the top 10% here, but we could be in the bottom 20% on some of the other stuff. So you need to fill your cups up and make sure that you're a well-rounded individual for when the game forgets about you.
I totally agree. That's the same thing in many aspects as well, isn't it? Where in any field you see people looking up to role models who might be an amazing, let's just take away from football, like business person, but they're a bad dad. And it is sometimes difficult to be good at everything, and ultimately I personally would prefer to be well rounded and well balanced than an absolute out and out specialist at one thing. And as you say, I think it is possible to be quite good at quite a lot of things. You don't have to be the best in the world at one and then suffer everywhere else. So the other question is, what does retirement look like to you? You can say that. I always have to say you can say that how you want, because a lot of people answer say I'm not going to retire, etc., etc. I just mean, how do you see yourself in 30 years?
30 years. The aim is to be as fit as possible at 68, if that's when I choose to retire. So still able to get up and go for a run in the morning, do all the things that I need to do, and be as fit as possible. So that's what I'm aiming for. Try and be the fittest 68-year-old in the world. And sometimes when you think about that, or when people think about that, they think that they have to go and maximise today and go and run the fastest 5K or go and do a marathon in under 3 hours or whatever. That's not actually what it's about. It's about building a consistency blueprint so that you're still able to do a 5K at 68 in 30 years' time. I'm part of a big running community at the moment called Made Running, and I'm running every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday with them, and it's a 5K. And some of them are turning up in the 21 to 22. They're eager, they're keen, they're excited. The knees feel great. My son comes and he's quite a good runner, and he's closer to their age than I am. They did an event with JD Sports a couple of Saturdays ago, which went really well. There's 700 people in Manchester running at 9 a.m. And I got talking to a couple of kids that are just about to do Paris Marathon this weekend. Good luck to them. And they were talking about what paces people were doing and all that. And I'm like, come on, lads, I'm 15 years older than you guys, and my son's 15. Do you think in 15 years you'll be still going to these runs with your 15-year-old if you used to have a kid tomorrow? And they looked at me and were like, I don't know. And that's what it's about. It's about longevity. It's about staying power. It's about still being in the game at 68 in whatever capacity that is. So have you got systems and habits that are going to allow you to be the best version of yourself at 68? Because if Made Running's still on, I want to still be going at 68 and doing a 5K and not being the last person round there. And sometimes at the end of a run, especially on a Saturday, people are getting up and we're celebrating people, and sometimes people are being celebrated for being 45 and doing a 5K. And I'm like, big achievement, but already he's in the 1%. We're here celebrating him because he can do a 5K at 45. It's not what it's about. It's about sustainability and consistent habits to be the best version of yourself, and making sure that you're doing a little bit every single day to get better, to get to that goal. So for me, retirement, I don't know when I'll retire because my brain doesn't switch off, but the thing that I'm most focused on is still being able to do a 5K at 68.
Yeah, and I think that knocks on into if you fit at 68, you're going to be ready to do whatever you fancy doing at the time. You're going to be in a position to have the freedom to choose.
Yeah.
If you still want to work, you'll be fit enough. If you want to chill, you'll be fit enough. If you want to kind of still be giving back like you're doing a lot now, you'll be fit enough to do that as well.
Yeah.
And that's the key, really.
That's
Because
it.
ultimately, in 30 years' time, it is hard to predict to know what you'll want to be doing, but it's key to be able to be in a position where you can still do whatever you want.
Yeah. And we've all been. You might be in the situation now where you feel like the thing that you're doing right now is perfect, and you're going to do that forever, which is probably not going to be the case. So I wouldn't even like to sit here and say what I'm going to want to do in my late 60s, or where business is going to take me, because it's just moments in time, and eventually it's going to be a memory. But the key factor is that if the grandkids want to go and do a 5K, I'm there. Like, do you know what I mean? And that was the thing when Alano's 15 now, but when he was 4 or 5, I'm like, when he gets to 12, 15, I need to still be able to do a 5K with him. Or when he's 20, I want him to be able to text me and say, fancy a 10K? I'm like, yeah, let's go. I've got my trainers on right now. Like, it has to be that mentality. And he's 15 now. He's throwing out super 5K times. He'll do it like in 17 minutes. So I'm there, but I'm not there. Like, do you know what I mean? 3 or 4 minutes behind him, but we're still in the game. So, yeah, for me, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, keep the questions going, Josh.
Yeah. Well, that's everything from me.
Okay.
Really, really, really good episode. Really appreciated you coming on. Yeah, thanks very much. And if anyone wants to look any more into Aaron, you can find the links at the bottom of this podcast. Make sure you check out his book club, check out his website, and check out his Instagram. Thank you.